Hello and welcome. I'm Angela Starren, Senior Director of Advancement at the Lincoln Presidential Foundation. So glad you can join us for today's latest generation film contest mentor session, The Ethics of AI in Documentary Filmmaking, with Louise Rosen, Christopher Hastings, and Jason Steinhauer. At the Lincoln Presidential Foundation, our mission is to share the story of Abraham Lincoln's life, legacy, and leadership with all people. The latest generation film contest takes its name from a powerful question Lincoln asked in 1861. Shall the Union and shall the liberties of this country be preserved to the latest generation? This question challenges each generation to consider its responsibility in shaping the nation's future. Building on that idea, this year's theme, Think Anew, Act Anew, American Innovators and Changemakers, draws inspiration from Lincoln's 1862 annual message to Congress. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. As America marks 250 years of history, the contest invites young filmmakers to explore stories of people across the United States who faced milestone changes or generational challenges with creative ideas and bold action. This year's theme encourages you to uncover stories from the past where people recognized a moment of change and found new ways to think and act that helped a community, a region, or the nation not just survive but thrive. Now in its second year, the contest is open to participants across the United States, ages 14 to 22. Submissions are due February 28th with cash prizes from $500 to $2,000. And winning films will premiere at a red carpet event in Chicago in spring 2026. These mentor sessions will help you see how filmmakers bring accurate and compelling stories to life. The program is offered in partnership with the Better Angels Society, supported by its Amy Marjoram Berg Education Fund. And before we jump into the session, we're going to start with a one-question poll to get a sense of how you're feeling about using AI ethically in your film projects. So I will launch that poll now. Okay. Okay, so how confident are you about using AI tools ethically in your documentary filmmaking? So go ahead and choose. The results are coming in. Okay. All right. Um, it looks like we've got a range. Our mentors have some insights that will be valuable to everyone, so I'm glad you're all here. And thank you for answering. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Jason Steinhauer is a best-selling author and public historian working at the intersection of technology, politics, media, and history. He's the author of History Disrupted, a former global fellow at the Wilson Center, a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, and the founding director of the LePage Center for History and the Public Interest. He previously worked at the Library of Congress, and he's spoken across the US and around the world on countering disinformation, promoting media literacy, and the ethical use of technology. He frequently appears in the media, including BBC, C-SPAN, CNN Time, The Washington Post, and NPR. His Substack newsletter is read in 49 states and 109 countries, and his expired passport resides in the National Museum of American Diplomacy. And, I should have mentioned too, please add your questions to the chat as we go along. But Jason, we're really excited to have you with us, and please take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Angela, and thank you to the foundation and everyone involved with this contest for having me and Louise and Chris involved in this. This is really exciting. What a thrill to get a chance to talk to future filmmakers, current filmmakers, and future filmmakers about one of my favorite topics, artificial intelligence, and in the integration of AI into all of our lives, and particularly filmmaking. We have two very, very esteemed panelists, two panelists who have been in the field, who know the production side, the business side, everything about documentary filmmaking that you might want to know probably is encapsulated in the wisdom of these two individuals. And they're also just wonderful people that I've gotten to know over the past couple of years. So, without further ado, let me formally introduce them, and then I'll ask each of them also to talk a little bit about their career paths and journeys. But first, we have Chris Hastings, who is the president and CEO of WXXI Public Media, bringing a rich background from his previous role as executive producer and editor-in-chief of GBH's World Channel in Boston. There, he championed diverse perspectives through acclaimed series like America Reframed, Local USA, and Doc World. His award-winning work, including Peabody, DuPont Columbia, and Emmy honors, reflects his commitment to independent film and emerging talent. At WXXI, he leads with a vision to use public media to reflect and connect all communities in Rochester and beyond. And Louise Rosen is managing director of Louise Rosen Ltd. She provides a range of services to filmmakers, including consulting guidance on project development, editorial review at all stages of production, strategies for fundraising, distribution, and festival planning, and sales agency for project financing and distribution. Her projects have included Oscar, Emmy, and Sundance award-winning films. So both of them have really quite the impressive CVs. Chris, let me start with you. We've got aspiring filmmakers on this call. We've got people who are already working in film on this call. So I think it
Mhm.
would be instructive before we even get into the subject of AI to talk about your career journey a little bit, maybe in 3 minutes or less. How did you even get into this field? What was your entry point into the world of filmmaking and documentaries?
It started when I was 10 years old. I happened to go to a school outside of Philadelphia where they had a TV studio. And at the time, I had a learning disability, and that TV studio was sort of my respite to not having to read. But more important, it gave me a chance to be a creative in a learning environment. And I really, really got into all the technology. I would say that somebody put a camera in my hand when I was 10 and I never put it down. Um, from the time I was probably in fourth grade until I graduated high school, I always had TV as a sort of elective that carried me on to film school. In a small state school, Kutztown University, I went off to BET, where I continued to sort of work in the craft of video production, but more importantly within a newsroom. And so I got really intrigued with, um, quite frankly, just news, and that's always been part of my life. But my goal was always to sort of work in educational television, and educational television got me into documentary, and working with independent filmmakers. And I think for me, from that young age, being able to create and to express myself through the lens and through storytelling has always been sort of my jam. But more importantly, to be able to work with people who just want to use video as a medium to tell true stories, particularly those that they're not seeing anyplace else, I think is sort of what really got me into the work, but it's also sort of really got me to where I am today. You know, being able to sort of operate a platform where we get to enable storytelling is why I'm here. Because I think everybody has a story. And thanks to things like the iPhone and I'm just going to say it, even AI, yeah, it gives you the power to tell your stories in new ways.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Louise, same question to you. How did you get into this line of work to begin with? Um, and maybe that provides some inspiration or a blueprint to the future filmmakers on this call.
Well, I found myself in a program that was an offshoot of Peace Corps and Vista, where I got involved in doing audiovisual production work on a variety of projects, including one that had me on 9 different Indian reservations from Texas to Alaska. And that kind of led me into my first significant production experiences. I did wind up going into radio and radio ad sales. I worked for the big rock and roll radio station in Boston, and then Westinghouse Broadcasting. And my boss at Westinghouse was hired by WGBH, this is what Chris and I have in common, to revamp their distribution department. And I went in there as the director of international sales and co-productions, right into the deep end of the swimming pool, and found myself negotiating international co-pro deals with broadcasters in France and the UK for series like Vietnam, A Television History, and the Boston Pops music series. It was an incredible education into the international business of film and media, public media in particular. And given certain changes that went on at GBH, I decided to leave with my resume under one arm and a collection of independent films under another. And I went to one of the major market events in Cannes, where the Cannes Film Festival takes place, although this is an event that comes earlier in the season. And I said to myself, if I can sell the films that I've got under one arm, I'll start a business. And if I can't, hopefully I'll find a job. And I wound up selling all the films because there was a new broadcaster coming on the scene in the UK, Channel 4, which would be the second public broadcaster in Britain. And the buyer was there. They weren't on the air yet, but he bought everything that I had. And I thought, woohoo, this is really happening, this idea of representing independent filmmakers and taking their work abroad. And that grew into identifying independent work from makers internationally and helping to bring their work into the US. And then getting more deeply involved with filmmakers and ultimately helping them to raise finance for their projects by pre-selling rights and helping to guide them on creating packages and applications for grant proposals and investment and so on. So, my work has kind of covered, the business side as well as the creative side. I've certainly spent a lot of time reviewing content at various stages and helping people to devise treatments and proposals and so on. Nowadays, I don't act as a distributor of films individually. I serve as a consultant to filmmakers, but I'm also involved in programming events around the making of media. Chris and I worked together not so long ago on an event in Germany about history media making, and really from a very international perspective, including high-level professionally made media and user-generated content that was helping to document certain moments in history. So we really covered a lot of different areas in that conference, and very important because our topic tonight of history media is obviously undergoing a significant amount of pressure as it relates to the influence of artificial intelligence. That trend in programming that we saw, where there were very expensive reenactments of events that were being done to kind of heighten the value of history documentaries, has now kind of translated into how much of that reenactment can be done using AI, and what else can AI do in the history space. So I'm excited to be, reviewing this topic with the two of you and your backgrounds, because I think that we really are at an inflection point as it relates to history and the media, and an exciting one.
So you've actually a little bit previewed my next question, which is great. So we're going right from one topic to the next. But quickly, for the aspiring filmmakers on the call, I've already got two takeaways from that first answer. The first one is that there are lots of different entry points into this field. And so encourage you to think about all those different entry points and explore them and be creative about them. And the second is from both of your backgrounds, the amount of work in the field and how varied it is. You could be on the creative side, you could be on the business side, you could be shooting with the camera, you could be editing, you could be doing distribution and finance. There's so many ways to get involved in the field for those who are passionate about it, which both of you clearly are. And as I mentioned, Louise, you anticipated my next question because when we think about AI, I mean, I think we're all feeling like this is a very big seismic change, a change to our landscape, our creative landscape, a change to the way we do business, and just a way that we think about ourselves as human beings. But as people who've been in the field for a while, you've also seen other changes. So I was wondering if we could think about putting the changes of AI in the context of previous changes that you've seen in your careers in the field. So Chris, let me come back to you. Over the course of your time in the field, what are some of the really big changes that stand out? It can be on the creative side, it could be on the technical side, it could be some of the tools that are used. And, how do you see artificial intelligence and AI applications in a broader scope of changes that the field has undergone?
I think the big change over the past 20 years is to make content. It used to be that you would use film cameras and large scale, what you would call professional technology, to capture, acquire your content, particularly when we're talking about camera technology. During the 90s, it switched to digital, and I mean small format cameras that were, you know, pretty much look at the professional quality, and they got smaller and smaller and smaller. And then fast forward during the 2000s, it went from physical media to digital media, meaning you had to go from tape to being able to shoot on hard drives and flash drives and central storage. And so that meant that you could shoot forever. And means that you could capture anything and you could use digital media from here and there, to make your content. I think if I had to compare those evolutions, um, to what's happening with AI, that's the closest thing I would compare it to, because the camera technology continued. You now have iPhones that shoot in 8K. You now have storage that is in the cloud, and AI is right there on the edge there, where it's changing how you do research. It's changing how you acquire third party content. So I think it's sort of kept pace where things were going anyway. Technology really opened up more stories. It meant that more people were able to share stories, to tell stories, to capture stories. And so I think AI is sort of on par with, okay, I don't want to say it's lowering the barrier, but it's literally lowering the barrier to entry to who can create and who can't.
Great. Louise, same question to you. Changes that you've seen over your time in the career and how you're thinking about AI in the context of those changes. Is this a rupture, something completely different, or is it, as Chris was saying, maybe an evolution of a process that has been undergoing over the past 20 to 30 years?
Well, I think speaking to the tech changes that Chris has described, the means of production is becoming, much more accessible to a wider range of people. That doesn't change the fact that you need to bring a skill set to production. I will sound a bit of a Luddite at the moment and say that, back when we were using film, it required a pretty high level of discipline because you only had, a certain length of run for each, each film can. You had to be, the cost of actually producing that film was very high. So it really required I would say, a degree of discipline that we don't have now, where digital production is there's a tendency to kind of overshoot. And that makes it much harder in editing. And it makes it much harder to craft a story out of all of that material. So a lot of the advice that I give to people is to say, think of what you are shooting. Think of your means of production as being something precious, because it'll help you to kind of sharpen your thinking and sharpen your focus on what is really essential to your storytelling. But to the point about what changes has it wrought on the business side, my experience goes back to the days when, I don't know, some of the audience may not even be familiar with this, but if I went to a sales conference in France, for example, I was shipping 3/4 inch cassettes of my programs across the Atlantic, through a shipping agent, costing hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and then, setting up to show these things off of these very cumbersome cassettes. Nowadays, of course, everything is digital and you can stream, and it means that the gateway to sharing material with people globally is just, a hot knife through butter. It's really easy. And that has, I think, aided significantly in accessing the marketplace.
Great. Okay, well, let's dive into the subject of AI specifically. And of course, AI is a broad, broad category of all kinds of tools and applications. Technology can be applied to finance, it can be applied to healthcare, it can be applied to history, it can be applied to journalism, it can be applied to filmmaking. There's lots of different ways that these technologies get integrated and types of applications that are integrated into all aspects of our lives increasingly each year. But I wonder if maybe before we dive into the specifics of tools, which I think some people will have questions about, which tools can I use, which ones can I not use, which ones are good, which ones are bad. I wonder if we can establish maybe some sort of broader framework for even thinking about this, right? So when we think about AI in the context of documentary filmmaking, are we seeing it as primarily something that helps people be more creative, that helps people generate concepts or ideas that they maybe are not able to generate on their own? As you said before, Louise, reenactment of historical scenes that may have been impossible to stage or exorbitantly expensive to hire people. Are we seeing it as a replacement for some types of labor inside documentary filmmaking? Is it an augmentation? Does it make some types of labor a little bit easier, a little bit faster? Chris, let me back over to you. Just generally speaking, like, what is the framework within which you even think about these technologies in the course of your work?
I think that question is on a spectrum, right? Um, AI is moving so fast. And when we're talking about AI, we're not talking about one tool. We're talking about many tools that literally live in the cloud. And to be clear, we've been using AI for years and we may not even known it. Anytime you use Google search, that's really a form of AI. If you use spell check, that's a form of AI that's embedded in Word. I would say that the way I position it is AI is a tool. The creator and the journalist still is the one who has to sort of use the tool for whatever you're using it for. So maybe it could be as simple as writing the treatment. Maybe use AI to do the research. But I know some people are letting AI write the treatment, and that in itself pushes it to another side of the spectrum. Um, I would say carefully, I think the tools that are there, it really does really decide on how you as the individual choose to use it. What's scary about the moment is that the tools have moved so fast that they can do so much that an untrained person might think you can use it for everything. And so I would, offer a bit of caution to that. The tools are still evolving. The tools are still very much, um, very, very, right in the cut of pushing up against um, not censorship, but what's the word? Copyright infringement in some cases. As I'm sitting here today, before we got on this Zoom, this background behind me, Zoom now has a way to make a generative background. I don't know where that is. I don't know where that theater is, but the way they were able to make that background is because they trained the AI to show a theater. And so is that copyright infringement? I don't know. I don't know if they're training on somebody's art. So you have to sort of understand that the use of AI lives on a spectrum, and some tools you're able to just use it for some aspect of it. Some tools can do it all, but I think you also have to go into it with a bit of caution that it's not everything. It can't be everything. And it's pushing up against creative expression a little bit too, because people, the way AI works is it learns from what it's seeing, it learns from what it hears. And so there's an active conversation about, is it really generating it on its own, or is it doing it because it saw it somewhere? Is it taking it somewhere? And some people would say that it's stealing so that it can generate this beautiful picture behind me.
Yeah, so you're previewing some of the questions about ethics that we'll get into in a minute.
Right,
Louise, I'm
right.
wondering if you have a general philosophy about these technologies as it relates to filmmaking before we dive into some of the more specifics. I mean, do you think about this as augmentation? Do you worry about it as replacement? Do you see it as sort of as we talked about earlier, just a massive reduction of barriers to entry, whether it be for uh, talent, creativity, graphics? What's your general, if you have one, or if it's still in formation, your general philosophy about how AI gets implemented in this world?
I think it's a tool for creation that you have to use carefully. It's we all have our superpowers, right? But I think you kind of have to use that superpower with care. And as we're talking about documentary, I live on the spectrum that documentary is journalism, and so I try to make sure that if we're going to use it, we still have to use the tools of journalism to guide how, when, why. And one of the sort of principles for me with journalism being transparent, um, that that a tool is being used if we think it's something we need to use. Um, how that looks on the outside, I'm not sure. I think we're literally, this is a conversation that's happening in some of the most billion-dollar companies in the country right now. Netflix, for one. Everybody's developing some sort of AI policy. I would say that it's very much a tool that we shouldn't ignore because it may help you do something that you wouldn't have been able to do a couple of years ago. But I think you always have to keep the understanding that this is a craft and it is using the rules of journalism when it's presented. And the audience really trust us that we're being honest with them as makers. And I think that's the most important thing that guides me as I'm talking to my producers is like, I would never tell a producer no, but I would tell them, okay, what is the journalist telling us to do? What is the journalism telling us to do? We still have to lean on that as our sort of basis for why we would use a tool or how we would use a tool and when we would use a tool.
Louise, same question to you.
Well, speaking from the distribution side of it, what sells, what works, what appeals to buyers, what is viable in the marketplace, authorship matters. And
Mhm.
people who make decisions about what to fund and what to acquire, what to show, what to exhibit, they are looking for distinct voices, distinct storytelling. And that is not something that AI can produce on its own. So I really do think of AI as a tool, but it requires the authorship to bring it to fruition or to achieve its potential. And without the authorship of the human, the creator behind it, it feels flat. We're going to get into some of the aberrant behavior of AI and some of the problems that exist with it, but um, I would say that, kind of riffing off of Chris's point about journalistic practice, films about history are in a way making journalism about the past. And you do have to apply the same rigor that you would, and make it clear when, thinking of a newspaper, when is something an editorial and when is something reporting. Editorials coming from a journalistic board at a newspaper have to be factually based regardless. I'm not talking about letters to the editor. I'm talking about an editorial opinion coming from a publication. So it still has to be fact based. All of it has to be factual. And um, in the midst of that, there's still tremendous room for creativity, but you can't allow AI to go at it on its own. It's an incredible tool when it comes to things like, as you were saying earlier, research. Archive businesses have found huge advantages to using AI because it helps them to ingest new material, analyze it, create the metadata that allows us to then search it. And that was something that had to be done manually by human beings and was frankly, a huge grind. But with AI generated transcripts and other tools, that metadata that allows us to search new material can be made to exist, and thereby opening doors to stuff that we've never seen before. There's a huge amount of material in the world that's never been shared. And even home collections now are finding their way into history media making in a very significant way, because these are those individual stories of individual lives. So I just go back to the idea that it is a tool, but there has to be the human authorship, the creator authorship behind it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good segue into the next question. We're thinking about all the different types of applications that are now integrating some aspect of artificial intelligence into them. There's obviously a lot on the consumer facing side. There's things like large language models, there's Google Gemini, there's all kinds of products out there that are being developed seemingly every week that can allow people to create video like VEO or VEO, I don't know how you pronounce it, VEO. There's Eddy, which is a program. There's Runway, there's Topaz, there's Sora. And then obviously there's also pro tools like Adobe that is integrating AI into its professional suite of products that it rolls out. And that doesn't even touch on things like using AI for noise reduction or color correction or for visual effects. So let's get really practical and nuts and bolts here. Chris, which tools have you experimented with, if any, or are you allowing your team to experiment with? Which ones do you like, without it being an overt product endorsement, but just generally speaking, which types of tools have you found to be really effective? Which types of tools have you found to be not so effective, or actually end up taking more time, not less time, because you have to go in and troubleshoot them or fix them in some way?
I would say the tools that I'm experimenting with are the ones where we can really check the terms of service to sort of see that they're protecting what you're putting into it. And that's a real thing because all these tools out here aren't equal. When you think about some of the free tools, their terms of service say that you can use it, but we're going to take whatever you put in, whatever you feed it, so you can train their model. Those are the ones I don't use. I think what you have to remember is that these AI models are always learning and they're learning from what you give it. So I can tell you one of the things that I've said to my chief technology officers and IT folks at WXXI is, we can't stop the tool from being used, but what we can do is sign on with Microsoft, where they have this tool called Copilot that's built into Microsoft tools. And I said, won't we just go ahead and pay for it and get a contract that says whatever we put into it is just for our use. And at the very least, that allows us to use Copilot, which is a form of ChatGPT, to sort of experiment with how we might be able to use it. There's also a couple tools that Google makes where you can almost sandbox a learning, I can't remember the name of it at the moment, where you can sandbox. And the sandbox means you can put it into a bit of an island away from the rest of what the Google tools are. Um, I try to be open to using technology, but learning it. Jason, this technology is moving so fast. I think the first time we talked to you, SOAR 2 hadn't been released. But since we started talking 2 months ago, it's more out there more than ever. So much so that when we first started talking about this panel, the MLK estate had to literally like end up trying to get the company that owns ChatGPT to pull back all the images of Martin Luther King that were proliferating all over Instagram. I would say that be cautious with whatever you use. If you use it for free, assume that that AI model is learning from whatever you give it. And no matter what, remember this, you have to give it something before it can give it back to you. It's learning from you.
Another great piece of wisdom for the aspiring filmmakers: read the terms of service closely. Something that we don't always do in the digital age when we just want to sign up for new applications and give them our email address and allow them to access all of our data. That's a great lesson for the aspiring filmmakers and young folks out there. Louise, same question to you. Not necessarily product endorsement, but just generally, which types of tools have you found to be more beneficial, more applicable? Which ones have you found are just more laborious and maybe more time consuming than really they're worth?
I can't really speak to that end of it because I'm not actively engaging in production that is utilizing these tools. What I can say is that I'm watching very carefully as we see issues around bias, for example, coming into the forefront. Um, and as we're seeing that um, there are some serious concerns that AI can kind of turn on itself. The notion that it is these large language models are ingesting information from a wide range of sources means that they're ingesting information from some spurious sources too. And on the tech side, they're finding that, for example, if you keep providing an AI with mathematical equations that have wrong answers, it will develop a kind of evil feeling that will manifest itself in other ways. I mean, I don't want to go too far into the kind of sci-fi aspect of it, but to return to the bias notion, we have to remember that we know from earlier editions of AI, for example, the earliest editions of facial recognition technology used in surveillance in communities across Britain, for example, had very distinct bias around people of color and had trouble differentiating faces, and therefore, there was a lot of misdirect that took place. So I I can see that there are applications in terms of research and visualization and other opportunities, but I think that huge care has to be taken in how it's deployed. I noticed that one of the questions in the chat is, can I use AI voiceover that is accurate but man-made? And I think that that is only part of that question, accurate but
Right.
man-made, because what has it been made from? The imitative qualities of AI in a voiceover really does put you headlong into that challenge of, am I infringing on the copyright of someone else?
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you were to use your own voice and then ask the AI to imitate you in reading a voiceover script, but maybe do a better job of it in terms of dramatic inflection, well, then essentially that's yours. Um, so
But
sorry,
can I
go
just
ahead,
add something?
Chris.
Here's the
Yeah,
gotcha though. Once you give it your voice print of your voice, there's a chance that you're giving up the rights to your voice. So
right.
you might be using it for your content, but you're teaching it on your voice how to use it for somebody else's content. So just remember that. Not to interrupt, but there's
No,
a
no,
con.
it's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. Um, so I mean, again, I suppose I am very much in the, keeping it in the toolbox frame of mind rather than using it as a generative tool in this area that we're talking about specifically, which is history media making. Um, Tool, but not, not creator.
You also kind of touched on the next area that I wanted to talk about, which was the propensity for these applications to generate incorrect or non-factual information. This has been widely reported on in the press, and it's a huge issue. If we think about documentary film as either a manifestation of journalism or a manifestation of history or a combination of the two, both of those professions rely heavily on research and establishing with some authority some expectation that the events you're depicting actually happened. I'll just share as a funny anecdote. I got a text message from a friend recently that she was arguing with a large language model about a recipe because she knew in her heart that this French recipe involved leeks, but the large language model insisted that it involved potatoes. And she literally had a 30-minute argument with the large language model until the large language model acceded that she was right. And she actually sent me a screenshot of the text that it generated that said, I apologize, you were correct. This recipe involves leeks, not potatoes. Now, I'm assuming that most of us do not have 30 minutes to argue with a large language model about a piece of information and whether it is factually correct or accurate or not. So, how should we think about this when it comes to doing research or using these applications to find information for filmmaking, which we, again, for the documentary world at least, insist on it having some grounding in actual events? Do these applications offer us too many potholes and too many warning signs when it comes to factual, accurate information for us to trust them in this respect? Is there a way to use them that is guided by other types of research, whether it be in libraries or in archives or relying on subject matter experts? How do you think about this problem, Chris?
I mean, again, I go back to journalism. If you're using AI as one tool, you still should have a fact checker. Um, and I think what's important is that the AI might give you part of the story, but you should always take it the next level and have a human who understands the history, who, some sort of expert who might have even written a book about it. I think AI can lead you down some paths with that, but where you have to be careful is AI may not always be right. They may be quick, the AI, but you still have to put the time in the fact check what you're doing. And I think it really depends on the scenario, right? Um, I wouldn't trust it to know everything, or at least give you the full story. Um, what it can do, though, is really help you think and process if you're using it in the right way. Um, I think you have to always be careful right now. The technology and the way these bots are training, like even in that 30-minute conversation that your friend had, that bot was probably in the background, like, okay, well, let me run a different scenarios of how you might do this. Like it's literally learning from her conversation with a human. And so if you have researching something it hasn't researched before, you might be telling it the history and then they make the dots. That's like how fascinating the technology is. It's literally writing itself.
Louise, same question to you. How do you think about this problem? What types of safeguards do you see filmmakers need to implement into their process, or are you seeing that already in some of the work that you're doing?
Well, to start with the last part of your question first, I have seen some amazing examples of how AI has been integrated into filmmakers' work. And some of it is actually to quite transparently show something that is evocative rather than meant to be literal. I think that we run into significant problems when we're asking AI to give us a literal representation of something. And I know that Ken Burns, archive researcher, as a demonstration of some of the problems, um, showed an example of something that they had asked AI to produce for them, which was, show us some footage of a gold rush town and life in a gold rush town. And what it produced was something that basically showed white men. But the reality is there were all kinds of people and a great mix of races working in gold rush towns. Um, so again, it's sort of back to how do you guide it and what is it that you're asking it to do within what kind of parameters. Um, some of the best work I've seen is in the vein that I mentioned earlier, is very intentionally not literal. So in other words, you may have a voiceover that is describing a moment in time during the Second World War, but what you're seeing are kind of ambiguous figures on a landscape that almost has a graphic feel to it rather than a photographic feel to it. But it's very powerful and it's very evocative, but it doesn't pretend to be that moment. And sometimes that does the right thing in the project that you're working on. I know that there's a question about, question for Louise, do filmmakers generally hold the copyright for visuals created using AI? That is exactly to Chris's point. You have to be very specific in the terms and conditions and in setting up a kind of fence posting around the work that you're doing, if you can. But you need to think about that in advance, unless you're willing to have, your creative work shared widely.
Yeah, I don't even
Speaking,
know if you can
oh,
copyright AI generated work.
yeah, so I just put a link in the chat. The Copyright Office of the United States has actually been written several opinions about this. And there was a recent opinion that suggested that if there was enough human involvement, then it could be copyrighted. But if it was AI generated alone, then it could not be
Okay.
copyrighted. So it's still an evolving area of law, and intellectual property is having to deal with this. The legal profession in general is having to deal with this. And a lot of this is not settled, as you said, Chris, because as the technology continues to evolve, new questions will come up. Speaking of questions, I want to make sure that people who are watching have a chance to ask questions. So if you do have more questions, we've had a couple already, but if you do have more questions, you can place them in the chat or the Q&A. We'll find them in either place. We had a question already about AI voiceover. We had a question about specific tools. Someone asked about Adobe Firefly. Another person asked about copyright. If anyone else here has a specific question that they want Chris and Louise to address in the time remaining that we have, please do so. Let me take moderator prerogative to ask a final question here, Chris. There's obviously these tools are changing rapidly, as we said. It seems like new ones come out all the time. For aspiring filmmakers or even people who are in the business, how have you found to be the best way to stay up to date on what's happening? Certainly, I've heard anecdotally from people in lots of different professions the anxiety about the tools evolving so fast that their own skill set will soon become obsolete in the face of all these changes. What advice would you give to young filmmakers about staying up to date, whether it's through experimentation, whether it's through formal groups like professional guilds or professional associations? Um, any insights that you're offering to your team about that you could share with us?
I mean, I think the one thing that I try to tell them is experiment with the tools that we're paying for, because at the very least, those tools are already at your desktop. But I think it's super important that you join webinars like this when they're happening. And I can tell you there are tons of webinars and conversations that are happening that are being hosted by companies like Adobe. They just had Adobe Max a couple weeks ago, and I can tell you they usually have about 10 different panels. And I think the reason why they're having these panels is because they're part of the front end of how you use the technology at your desktop, and they see a business benefit to it. Um, there are other companies like Google where they have some other front end tools where they hold webinars. Canva, if you know what Canva is, that's actually, I believe, a Google product. And so they have these sort of YouTube webinars where they're always talking about it. What's one thing that I want to be very clear about, the technology and the tools that are coming out, it is really moving at a fast pace as people try to monetize it. I would encourage you to don't feel like you got to rush into everything. I think there's a craft of storytelling, particularly if you're young, that you can tell a story without AI. And if you have the time, try doing your first cut without any AI. Try to see, what it's like just to comp something together with whatever third party B-roll, even if it's not cleared yet, just to sort of get the story out. Do your first pass on paper. Um, and I mean, type it in Word. You don't got to handwrite it, but try to really think about just the tools of the craft of just storytelling first, and then go to the AI. Now, I know that sounds weird because there are like lots of million-dollar companies doing 30-second commercials completely with AI. And then look up Coca-Cola, and you'll see a whole backlash of people doing end-to-end AI content. But I encourage you, if you are young and you are a storyteller, learn the craft first, learn journalism first. Know that AI is going to be there. You don't have to rush in and start using it right away.
Louise, same question to you.
Yeah,
You're
I'm not making I'm not being paid to make this plug, but um, I would get a subscription to Wired magazine. $10 for a 1 year subscription. You are getting bits and pieces that are really at the forefront, and they're doing a lot of really excellent reporting on what's going on in the field. And they're also looking at how technology is at the intersection of art, commerce, and politics, and I think it offers some really great insights. So I would recommend that as one thing. Um, I'm, I suppose I just have to second everything Chris said about, work out your storytelling without it initially and see where that gets you. And if you are, become very aware of holes that need to be filled by footage that you can't get or by, images that you can't get, then start to think about how it might be able to help you. But it doesn't take the place of storytelling. There's no question about it. You still need those chops. And there are some very, very funny stories of filmmakers that have worked on trying to get those stories out completely in AI, and just, what a headache it can become. So do yourself a favor and drive it forward under your own steam, and then see where it can come in to complement the work that you're doing.
AI will come and go, but storytelling is forever.
There you go.
Um, Last question to you both, as I know we're approaching time, and if there's other questions, we will work them in. Um, Wondering, maybe Louise first, you've been at the forefront of the business side of documentary filmmaking for so long. Just from a young filmmaker's perspective that wants to get into the business, do you feel like having those AI skills or having some experience with AI applications will be an added benefit? Do you see that as being something on a resume or a CV that will stand out as something that would position you to get a position with a documentary film company or to even work with someone like yourself?
I, No, is the answer. Um, we are in a very interesting moment uh, as it relates to short films, which this contest is all about. Um, Short films were very prominent in a period of time when public media and even pay television used short films as interstitial material. They weren't running commercials. Public media across Europe used loads of short films to kind of fill in those gaps between programs. Then, things became kind of more commercialized, more promotional. Public media was showing ads, et cetera, et cetera. Short films kind of fell out of favor. They're coming back in a big, big way. And short films are a calling card for aspiring filmmakers in a way that they haven't been in many years. They have opportunities in film festivals that they never have before, and opportunities to be shown on various platforms that they haven't had before. So, my thought is that a competition like this is in a way a kind of direct runway into accelerating your career. It's a piece of work to have in your portfolio. And the more it represents your skill and your talent rather than that of an AI, the better.
Chris, same question.
Um, I would say the elements of a story are still the same: beginning, middle, end, three arcs. Um, I think what's important here is I go back to where I started on this. AI is just a tool, and it's important for you all to learn the craft of the storytelling in journalism. At some point, AI may become part of the train of you finishing that story, but it can't all be one thing, one tool. The most important tool is what's in your head, and what you're learning and what you're hoping to share out with your audience.
Great. Well, thank you both. And I'll turn it back over to Angela. And hopefully, this session was informative and stimulating and offered our young filmmakers some good food for thought as they think about the importance of these tools and/or the lack of importance of these tools into their future film careers.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Chris, Louise, and Jason. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. And we hope that you'll join us for our next session. We have a couple of great ones coming up. Next will be Wednesday, December 3rd at 7 Eastern, and it's called Authentic Voices, Powerful Stories, Indigenous Representation on Film. So Indigenous representation on screen shapes how we see the world, and who tells the story makes all the difference. Join award-winning filmmaker Jeremy Charles Cherokee and museum leader James Pepper Henry Muskegee for an inspiring conversation about bringing Native perspectives to the forefront of filmmaking. Those should be really good. Hope you can join us. And we'll be sharing other dates and topics soon. Before you leave, please complete the short survey, very short, that appears when you exit. Your feedback helps us continue to improve these programs. Thank you so much for being part of the latest generation film contest community. Can't wait to see your films and have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much.